Since the 1970s, the film industry has been contending with the chin. Now, Gareth Miles and Simon Appleton examine each year in the career of Bruce Campbell.
Hey, I'll follow your soul! I'll follow your soul! I'll follow your soul!
Swallow this. Hello and welcome to This, A Year in the Career. This is a podcast where we hope to chronicle the career of an actor, voice artist, producer, writer, sound editor and director that is known as Bruce Campbell. Each week we plan to take a look at his career right up to date, looking at every film and television project that he's been involved in, watch it, analyse it and see if his career is worth the accolade that we do hold it with. Joining me on this quest is Simon Appleton from MovieMustache.com. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
Looking forward to getting your teeth right into Bruce Campbell's career? Yeah,
I certainly am. Is an actor I'm not so familiar with, so it would be an interesting new facet to look into.
Well, if you want to get in touch with me, you can by going to GarethMiles.com or at Gareth Miles on Twitter as well. That's where I'm most active. Simon, you're online as well?
Yes, I am. You can find my blog at MovieMustache.com. You can also find me on Twitter at movie_mustache.
Excellent. Well, Bruce Campbell is an actor who you either have heard of him or you haven't. I would say that the majority of people who have heard of him like him very much and have virtually no negative things to say about him. So Bruce is an actor who was born in Royal Oak, Michigan on the 22nd of June 1958. He's currently 61 years old. That works out as. If he's listening, I apologise for announcing your age, but there you go.
Trust your maths.
Should be about right. He's quite a diverse guy, to be honest. Whenever you have a look through his filmography, you'll see that he's first and foremost an actor. That's his bread and butter, I would imagine. But more recently, he's become a voice artist, appearing in a lot of cartoons, TV shows, and animated films. But he's also produced movies throughout the years, some of which have been quite famous, some of which have just gone sort of direct-to-video and maybe just disappeared, or sat on the indie circuit and only really done some business during those years that they were being released on DVD and things. He's written a lot of projects. You would be surprised at some of the projects that his name is attached to. And in the early days, he actually worked as a sound editor and things on various different independent films for colleagues and other filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers who were trying to get things off the ground. Then, of course, he made the transition across to director, where he's directed a number of episodes of fairly well-known TV shows. Bruce is of Scottish ancestry, much like myself, actually. He's part of the clan Campbell of Argyll, and they would have been supporters of King Robert the Bruce. It's just possible where his name could have come from. I'm of Clan Williamson, who are in no relation to the Clan Campbell in any way possible. One of Bruce's best known roles is Ash J. Williams in the Evil Dead franchise, which spans 4 films, 3 or 4 different video games, and a 3-season TV show. There's even a stage musical as well. Bruce is pretty much the only actor who has played Ash throughout. However, there has been an actor who does the stage musical. Other roles that he is best known for are Briscoe County Jr. from the short-lived 1-season TV show that is held in very high regard, and I look forward to exploring that with you, Simon, is The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. He's also known for Hercules and Xena, where he had a recurring role as Autolycus and directed some of those as well. And I'd say most recently, actually, he was in a long-running TV show called Burn Notice, where he plays Sam Axe, that got his own spin-off movie as well. He's been attached to all kinds of different projects over the years, including the Spider-Man trilogy, Darkman, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Congo, Cars 2, and Escape from LA. The terrible sequel to the wonderful Escape from New York. He started out his career in Michigan, goofing around, to quote the word that he uses, with the likes of Sam Raimi, Scott Spiegel, and Josh Becker, making a bunch of Super 8 films. And that's what we're going to look at in this particular episode of the podcast. Before we get into the meat and bones of his career in the next episode, starting with The Evil Dead, we will have a look at some of the early work and some of the notable shorts that he and Josh, Sam, and Scott produced during the mid to late 70s before getting their big go at Hollywood. And we spent some time doing that. He does have an awful lot of peculiar little films attached to his filmography whenever you're looking through it, and as we go along, we're going to be delving into different territories of written books and audio books, and there's even stage plays that we can discuss if we manage to track down any information about it. So I want to make this as thorough an analysis of his career as you could possibly get out there, and I hope that you, the Bruce Campbell fan base that's likely listening to this, are on board with it and thoroughly enjoy it. And if you have any information for us that you feel that we should include in future shows, or just generally want to have your views aired, then you can do by emailing us at Gareth@ayearinthecareer.com and Simon at ayearinthecareer.com. And
It's quite a mouthful, that one, isn't it?
It is, yeah. There's a lot of S's going on. No, is it S's? No, that's probably just me. We'll go with that. It's just me. So, Simon, your experience of Bruce Campbell. Tell me about it. Tell me your story. How do you know the man? When did you first come across him?
I have very limited interaction with his filmography. In fact, I think the first time I would have come across him was when Sam Raimi's Spider-Man hit cinemas in 2002, and then had no idea who he was. He appeared in Spider-Man 2, and I thought he was in the first Spider-Man. And then, being the astute man I am, I also recognised he was in Spider-Man 3 as well. And he was probably one of the best things about Spider-Man 3,
yes.
Which isn't saying much, but we will give him credit for it anyway. So it has been an interesting idea for me to approach this, because having been a fan of movies all my life, this is, as I say, a man I don't know so much about, so it's been interesting to start exploring his career and seeing where he came from and where he's gone on to be.
Yeah. Did you have any idea that obviously now you're a bit more familiar with his career span and those projects that he's worked on? Did you have any idea that it was so randomly varied?
I had some idea that it was quite very. I didn't realise quite to the extent that it is.
Okay, all right. Yes, it really is. And it's funny that he is. I guess he's a working man. He's got a family to support. He's got a home to run and things like that. So he's willing to lend his hand to anything to be able to provide food for the family that he is supporting. And that's I think that's the crux of his career, is that he's always. I remember a story he told about the TV show Weird Science that he made, which is a bit of a forgettable sitcom based around the classic movie, and I think they made maybe 2 seasons of it, but it wasn't held in terribly high regard. And Bruce has one episode in which he is a guest starring spot, and when interviewed about it, he said that he needed a new water heater in the house, and the paycheck for that role was the price of the new water heater, so he went and did that role. And I don't think you could blame anyone for having to do that. Obviously, the likes of the big Hollywood stars who are demanding $20 million a film can be very picky about what they do, because they know their next paycheck will be affected $1 million wise by the next film. But whenever you're looking after your family, you have to take whatever comes along whenever you need to do it, and that's, I guess, in some respects, one of the reasons why a lot of his career does have a few misfires, a few hokey movies. But whenever you look at the scale of it and the actual the combination that it makes for a very interesting and fun career, because he himself rises above the material that he's involved in, and that is a testament to the star power of Bruce Campbell and why he is so affectionately thought of by his fans and masses out there.
He's certainly not the first person to do it. Michael Caine famously did Jaws: The Revenge because it was several weeks in the Caribbean, and I think he bought his mother a house with the paycheck.
Yeah, I think it was. Do you like Jaws 4? Someone asked him if you like Jaws 4, and he said no, but I like the house that it built.
Exactly.
I guess that's the kind of thing, and some careers are full of those sorts of things. I think the likes of, say, Bruce Campbell is best paralleled with someone like William Shatner and Gareth Graham, to another respect, of jobbing actors who contain a lot of potential, but it's somewhat untapped because they are denied that kind of wide audience and have a more limited audience of big love. And I'm guessing that if tomorrow he was to have a big A-grade movie released, a lot of his fans might not see the charm in him anymore if he was to become that household name that everybody knew. If he was to become Bruce Willis, there would be quite a few fans that walk away because they like to enjoy the enigma that is Bruce Campbell currently. So myself, I've been a fan of Bruce Campbell since I was maybe about 15 years old. I had a friend who was really excited that Army of Darkness was coming out. I'd never heard of it before. I was aware of Evil Dead as a video nasty, but I'd never seen it. He got very excited about Army of Darkness because his father ran a video library and had seen Evil Dead, and he took me along to the cinema, and I watched it and thought this was great fun. It was very spirited action-adventure comedy thing going on, and I really enjoyed it. And I kind of forgot about it for a couple of years until Congo came out, and I saw the trailer for Congo, and I recognized his face in the trailer because he turns around and screams in the initial trailer, and I went, that's your man from that horror film that I watched with my friend. So I went and tracked down that horror film and the rest of the movies, and I sat with a different friend and we watched the three Evil Dead films back to back, and we had the best time. It was just so enjoyable. So I had to go and track down everything that I could get with this man in it, because his performance in the three Evil Dead films was just so enjoyable. I needed more, and I went and I found Congo and I found Maniac Cop and started looking them up. At the time, you didn't have the internet, so information wasn't readily available, so I was going into bookshops to try and find those big Halliwell film guides and things, and the movie retrievers and Chambers film facts. I have them all sitting on the wall behind me, looking to see if I could find more films that he was involved in, and doing that beloved, I loved it as a child, going into video shops and finding films on video that are for sale, or buried treasure, second-hand video shops, car boot sales, and finding a pretty dirty or tatty copy of Crime Wave or Moontrap or Mind Warp. All of these films, eventually tracking them down, there was no satisfaction as finding a film. And there was other actors that I was doing this with, the likes of Ray Liotta or John Cryer or Kevin Bacon and things, and trying to find their films to have a collection on video. But Bruce was the one I took to the extent, and I realized that before I knew it, I had a massive collection of his work. Admittedly, he was in some of those films maybe for 20 seconds. he does the cameo thing to a T. There's no actor who has cameoed in more movies than Bruce Campbell, save for maybe Hitchcock. And I was one of the lucky people who, at the time, Bruce was online, and you could email him. He had, I think it was bcact@aol.com, and he would reply to you with short, snappy, sarcastic answers to questions that you would send. And it was at a time that you didn't really question authenticity, because you kind of knew it was him. He would send you pictures, he would answer questions. And there was a film he made called Assault on Dome 4, which was originally called Chase Moran. And I remember one day in a dodgy video library in Belfast, I found a copy of it, a screener copy, that was sent out to video libraries and magazines for them to review. And I sent him a message saying that I watched Chase Moran recently, and he wrote back on, hang on a second, you've seen this before I have? Where did you see it? I was like, oh, in Belfast. It's in a dodgy bookshop at the back of one of our shopping centres. And he was like, what? So it was that kind of interaction that really endeared him as an actor to myself, and I have a nicely personalised signed photograph. Having never met the man, he did actually send me a signed photograph of himself with "Hey Gaz" written on it, which is one of my pride and joys, and whilst it's not stuck up on the wall, it's sitting in a pile of stuff over there on the other side of the room.
So Bruce was essentially tweeting before there was Twitter.
He was, yeah. He was one of these pioneers. I don't know if it was I reckon it was fan service before fan service became a thing. He was very thankful for his fans, and I think that was one of the things that made being a fan of Bruce Campbell so enjoyable, because whilst he goes to conventions now and he entertains, he's almost like a stand-up comedian to his fans, and he takes the piss out of them constantly throughout, and he does to himself and to everyone around him, but he just has such a likeable demeanour, and I think that rubbed off on the fans, so the fans became very respectful to each other. If you go out and you say something about the Avengers movies, if you say that you don't like a particular character publicly on Twitter, you will get no end of hatred towards you for lovers of that character. If you were to go out years ago and say that you disliked something about Bruce Campbell's career, people would listen to you. People would take on board what you were saying, and they would offer informed and constructed arguments about why they think you might be wrong. There was very little in the way of negativity when it came to being a fan and dealing with this being part of this community that Bruce was actually almost moderating, because he was able to clear up rumours, give people information about what he's doing next rather than people speculating, and if something was bad that he was working on, he kind of let you know it, which was really, it was an interesting thing for an actor to do. And I really think that when you look at his fan base, it's one of the friendliest and most interesting bunches of people out there. Admittedly, it's a bit weird that people would get chainsaws tattooed on their cleavage, but you know, that's each to their own. Everyone has to do their thing, and very few people say negative things about it. So it's a lovely big community, and I would actually put that out to everyone who's listening to this right now, because they would be part of that community, and I wish to hear from you. I look forward to hearing from you in the future, and if you want to have your 2 pence read out on the podcast, you can do by giving us a little bit of an email or a tweet or something like that to let us know that you're listening and you agree or disagree, or want to just voice your opinions.
And it begins.
Bruce's career started off in the 1970s. I probably think it would start further back than that. I don't want to do the man any disjustice, because he has 2 biographies out there that are very much worth purchasing, because it covers his early career and how he went off to summer stock theatre and perform plays and things like that. It's a cracking read, or a cracking listen, because I believe he's recorded audible books that you can listen through and get an idea of his upbringing and that sort of thing. So we're going to focus primarily on the work that he's done, that you can sit down and view in the comfort of your own home. And I think probably the best place to start with is what I can gather might be his first performance on camera, which would be Oedipus Rex, or Oedipus Rex.
Oedipus Rex?
Oedipus Rex, we'll go with that. That sounds a bit more intelligent. This goes to
no one's ever accused me of that.
This was a film directed by and starring Josh Becker, a name that will continually crop up throughout, well, especially this podcast, but in various podcasts down the line. It starred Bruce Campbell and Scott Spiegel as well. And whilst it could be called a short film, it really feels more along the lines of a family home video, where they film a special project on ancient Greece that they're performing live in a small room. It's a bit of a peculiar thing to call a short film, but it's a weird little thing. But it's nice to see a glimpse of him looking so young in 1972. Did you get a chance to have a look at this one?
No, I haven't had a chance to have a look at that one.
Well, to be honest, it's not really all that great. It's quite difficult to watch in its raw form. Tracking these things down is quite difficult. There's generations old copies on YouTube and things. But I will give a shout out to the website super8shorts.com, where you can purchase, I believe, maybe even directly from Josh Becker and Scott Spiegel and Bill Ward, copies of these films on DVD, lovingly restored, and I'll put a link in the show notes to those films so that you can get it. I haven't purchased it yet, but it probably will be purchased before the end of the day, actually, and seeing them in top quality would be great. The next film that I managed to track down in the bootleg avenue would be The Case of the Tabanga Pearl, which was quite a bizarre little film, which basically revolves around a pearl that's missing and the interactions between a private detective and various people looking for the pearl. I didn't get it particularly, but I did appreciate seeing Ellen Sandweiss, who is in The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi, Scott Spiegel, and Josh Becker in the actual film.
I watched part of it in my lack of sleep. I want to revisit it and give it another attempt. But the only notes I made was The Case of the Topanga Pearl. Odd.
That's one word to say for it. Well, it was made in '76, so it was a good few years after, and you can see how they've started actually setting up shots, using props and understanding how actually to deliver a narrative to the audience, and I think it would be more interesting from that point of view to see how they have actually matured as filmmakers from one film to the next in 4 years. The next film from '78 is a particularly big one, and I really like this one. I'd seen this a number of years ago. It was called Acting and Reacting. This stars Bruce Campbell and a bunch of the other familiar names, Scott Spiegel, Ted Raimi, which is Sam's brother, who will become a very recurring name you will hear on this podcast, Charlie Campbell, which was Bruce's father.
I will say I very much enjoyed this one as well. I thought it was very funny, and even by today's standards, very relatable. Some of the things he was saying I actually related to myself, and also great mustache.
It's a
fantastic mustache.
It's not quite porn star mustache, but it's
not porn star. But he pulls it off.
Yes, it's nicely young. Bruce does a lot of slapstick comedy, and there are funny lines throughout, very obvious puerile jokes throughout, but it's an interesting film to sit and watch, and it's a novel idea, and I think that was the best thing to take away from it. Where you might see some of these films being remade, this one works really nicely as a little short film. I couldn't imagine this becoming a feature film. However, I do think there might be connections between this and a later film which we will discuss called The Nut House, which I have echoes of this film coming through, although this is the superior version in every way. After that was Holding It, which was 1978. Again, this was one that I'd seen a long time ago, and it was nice seeing it in a slightly better quality. I really like this film. I think this is a proper lampoon about a gentleman who needs to go to the toilet and ends up getting caught up in a microfilm espionage plot while desperately needing to go to the toilet. I thought it was incredibly funny. It again is packed full of silly jokes, but it uses the likes of the soundtrack from The Man with the Golden Gun perfectly throughout, and it really helps prop up the limited budget and technical merits of the film, because they're obviously shooting on Super 8, and that's a very difficult thing to work with, but they keep it all together, and it makes for a fairly interesting little comedy that I do recommend people track down. Did you get a chance to have a look at this, Simon?
I didn't, but listening to you describe it is oddly relatable because I used to get involved in little film projects when I was in school, and we did one that springs to mind on drugs and being educated as to the dangers of illegal narcotics. And I seem to remember the little film we made incorporated clips from an episode of South Park and soundtracks from Bond films. I think we used A View to a Kill in the end, but that sounds oddly relatable. What I will say about all of the ones that I have watched is that regardless of at what point in their career they were working, the one thing that does bleed through is their absolute love of film.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so it makes sense that they would use things like the soundtrack from The Man with the Golden Gun to assist in their production.
Well, yeah, I think any budding filmmaker, whenever they're starting out, they get access to cameras and things like that and start putting things together. Then they suddenly realise how difficult it is to actually score a film and get music for a film. And music can really be make or break. So using big professionally produced music like something from a Bond film really adds that extra level and helps gel it all together. Whereas sitting there with an organ trying to hammer out some kind of appropriate beat for a film just doesn't work. And a perfect example and good segue into the next one, which was in 1978, was It's Murder. This was their big, ambitious Heaven's Gate production where they tried to make a 1 hour whodunit, a ridiculous, over-the-top, Stooges influenced whodunit with a crazy combination of characters and plot twists. It was directed by Sam Raimi. It stars Sam Raimi and his brother Ted and Scott, and Bruce Campbell and Cheryl Gutteridge, another name that we will come across throughout. And Tim Quill, who I didn't actually realise was part of their troupe back in the Michigan Mafia. I think they called themselves the Filmmakers Mafia of Michigan. Because he was quite a big role in Army of Darkness in '92. But this film cost them something like it was a couple of $1,000 to make. Whilst they were learning how to make films from scratch, I think the interesting part of this film was that they toured places with it. They took it out to sports halls and schools and things like that, set it up, and tried to attract people to come in and watch it. A bit like I think of them as the Blues Brothers going around. Tonight only in the Grand Hotel Ballroom we have, and they play this film and they collect admissions on the way in. People sit there for an hour, watch their their comical nonsense, and then leave.
YouTube circa 1978.
Well, yeah, and even if you were to go back further than that, that's what people did, when they would have an organist and a projector, and they would tour around like the Old West showing movies in the 1920s and 30s. So you would have a movie coming to town, and it's almost like they were doing that with this film, and I really like that idea. Sam, in an interview I discovered, was talking about how he had these giant speakers in the boot of his car, and he would have to hook those all up and get the thing ready and make sure that it was working, as he brought in cables that were like garden hoses and things to get everything working, to play this back to an audience. And that's another area of film production and distribution, I guess would be the best term for it, that they became experienced in, and it's dead now. You couldn't imagine that at all. People have a USB stick possibly with a movie on it if they want to go to somewhere like this, and a small projector. Your iPhone might even have a projector built into it, and it's so easy to do. Whereas back there in 1978, they were trying to tour around various venues selling this product that they'd made. And I don't think they ended up making a profit in the end, but they were displaying their talent. And
good showcase.
Yeah, I love the idea of what they were doing here. The film itself is quite difficult to watch. it's quite funny because I'm including Bruce Campbell in the cast. He's a stand-in for the other actors who weren't available for reshoots and things. So you'll have one shot.
It still counts.
Absolutely does, but you'll have one shot where there's a different actor, and then the next shot will have Bruce Campbell standing in the background, trying not to say anything or impersonating the person. So it's kind of interesting to see from that.
So, again, a common thing today. The example that springs to mind was the Simon Pegg film Paul. Seth Rogen, who voiced the alien, was actually on the shoot for much of, if any of it, and it was one of the guys who played one of the agents. I cannot for the life of me remember his name, who stood in for the alien and did all his lines. The same is of
Bradley Cooper.
Yes, Seth Gunn, I believe his name is. James's brother plays one of the Ravagers. He stands in for Rocket on set. Mm-hmm. So he was, even though he wasn't in the last two Avengers movies, he technically was, because he was the stand-in and provided all the lines on set.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, the legacy there almost. Absolutely,
yeah. The whole background of movie making is fascinating, and how things actually gel together. One thing that we take away from It's Murder was actually the one thing they learnt about it. The one thing that the audience most reacted to was a scare that happens midway through the movie. They noticed everywhere they took this, and every audience that watched it all jumped at that one scare, and that triggered their move to horror. Because up until now, they'd always tried doing Three Stooges comedy films. But that's what they'd grown up with. That was what they knew the best. And they took this step over to horror. They say that comedy and horror are the two hardest things to do, because you've got to engage and give an a shocking emotional reaction to something that people are watching. And they got it in It's Murder. It is worth watching for that one jump scare that they have in the film. But that led them to making another short in 1979 called Clockwork, which I don't believe Bruce Campbell was in, actually. I haven't seen it in quite some time, but I don't
remember him being in it when I watched it earlier.
Yeah, it could be one of those things, because he did do an awful lot of directing and camera work as well, so it could be connected to him through that way. But that was one film that took them in that direction. They realised, we can do horror, and Sam is actually pretty good at generating a bit of a scare. So they took that forward, and the Metropolitan Film Group, as they're called, decided to build this big film called Within the Woods. And it was a big film to them, and it is a big film to anyone who knows the legacy of The Evil Dead. It was made in 1979, and they went around investors and said, this is a film that we can make, and we would like to make a big feature film version of it. And these are the scares that we can have in there, and the gore. And Within the Woods itself is difficult to watch. Yes, it really is. It smacks of amateur and low budget, but everything's there that you can see, and it just needs that sort of that polish, that high production level to take it up a step. With Sam behind the camera on Within the Woods, you can see everything that he's capable of doing on a light diet budget kind of level. Did you watch Within the Woods?
I have not, but I'm definitely looking forward to it now. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this whole thing was I have never actually watched The Evil Dead or any of those. I'm not a big horror fan, but I'm actually really looking forward to watching it now, which is a strange thing to say for me. As I say, I'm not a big horror fan, and so I will be watching Within the Woods first, just so as I can see the parallels and the links, what they've learned from these previous projects, and how that bleeds into The Evil Dead and other films.
That'll be interesting to see your reaction to it, watching Within the Woods first, then Evil Dead, because I don't think many people have ever done that. They will have sought out Evil Dead or Within the Woods because they love the whole trilogy so much. It's like this little add-on bit or DVD extra that you would get, and I think it has been released on a couple of DVDs over the years. Again, Super8Shorts.com has a big, lush version of it on DVD for anyone to enjoy. It is great fun. It doesn't really cover the plot line of Evil Dead particularly well, but and it does get a bit muddy going through it, but you can understand how they're on a learning curve and why Evil Dead turned out to be such a big hit afterward because of everything that they'd learnt. So I guess that brings us on to the next film, which would actually be The Blind Waiter. And if you were to look at things from a logical point of view, The Blind Waiter would probably come just after they'd started or during the shoot for Evil Dead. And that makes it pretty interesting. I believe they'd filmed it all. And if you know anything about the horrendous torture that they were all put through making Evil Dead, from the sounds of it, from the likes of Bruce Campbell's biography or the Evil Dead Companion, I don't understand why they continued to work in film at all, unless they were just as dumb as the Three Stooges. But thankfully they did. And the first film they worked on was The Blind Waiter, which was a really stupid comedy that is
slapstick.
Incredibly slapstick, that really just mimics the whole Three Stooges act again. You watched this one, didn't you, Simon? Do you want to take a lead on it?
Yes, I did. One thing I did notice, and this will probably sound very ridiculous, but I liked the opening and closing credits. I thought the use of the little order, the waiter's notebook tabs. I used to be a waiter on my Saturdays.
Right.
God help me. And the idea, we never had the little clip spin wheel thing, whatever the hell you call it. But I just thought that the simplistic approach was a stroke of genius. I don't know why it struck me. I just looked at it and thought that is a brilliant way of doing the credits and an understanding of post-production and how you get these things in, because a lot of the other previous ones had very old school sort of 1950s era credits, but they went very simple and simply wrote all of the credits or the directed by and produced and etc. And like you say, it is a Three Stooges style slapstick. It's a bit silly, it's a bit over the top, but it will make you laugh. And some of the effects of the boiling water and some of the sound effects, it did just make me laugh. And as you say, if they had such a battle with making the Evil Dead, it would definitely make sense that they'd want to do something light-hearted and fun and just let's remember why we do this type project. And it shows they were having fun making this. You hear about a lot of films where they were not so very well received, and you'll often read in the reviews where it says, I get the feeling they had more fun making this than we did watching it. And I enjoyed watching it, and I get the feeling they had a lot of fun making this one, and it shows. So I actually enjoyed it a lot.
Yes, yeah, and I think what we walk away with, whilst it's not a beautifully polished comedy, you get the real feeling that there is so much talent here. I mean, there's one beautiful little shot where I think Sam Spiegel plays the chef, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell are in the kitchen. Bruce Campbell walks into the kitchen, opens the door, and does a pratfall. And I've got a funny feeling that wasn't in the script in any way. He just decided to do that. And each of the characters is just full of so much lunacy. I think I did make a note, actually, that Bruce Campbell put it as, it's quite a funny little film, 16 minutes of non-stop slapstick and verbal gags. And it is. It has nothing but gags. Every single shot is a setup for a gag or the payoff of a gag. And
I think one of my favourite ones was when the couple are sitting at the table and the bloke's already pissed off and he starts lighting up a cigarette and his wife looks at him like no, and sort of nods towards, and he just rips the no off the no smoking sign, and she's just like, oh well, and lights up herself. I don't know why that tickled me.
No, it's the simple things that are the best. Obviously, whenever you're making a comedy, not every gag is going to land, and not every gag does land here. But it's, I think it's on the right side of winning gags. So after that, they moved on to a pretty big, ambitious project again, and this is one of my favourites. It's called Striker's War. This was made in 1980. It's if you read about the film, it sounds ridiculous because initially I can't remember the person's name, Sheldon or something. Josh Becker approached one of his friends to write a film for him, and he returned a script that was 185 pages long called Bloodbath. So, yeah, and I suppose that they probably didn't want to jump right back into doing horror films again because they just finished The Evil Dead, and that had taken up so much of their time and mental health. Doing something with a bit more substance to it. But Striker's War is an incredibly simple little film that is obviously maybe inspired by the late 70s thrillers of Vietnam vets coming back damaged from the war and then having to reintegrate into society. However, in society they discover the likes of the sort of the Charles Manson-esque murderers that might be out there, and when their paths collide, the bloodbath that would ensue. So Bruce plays the lead character of I think it's Jack Stryker, who was wounded in Nam and comes back with a walking stick and a bullet in his leg, and he's just drinking out in the woods. His father plays another character called Otis, who is a daughter or a granddaughter who comes to visit him, and the two instantly fall in love in a slightly comical scene of let's not have to develop this, let's make a 40-minute film instead of a 180-minute film, which has a love affair that happens instantly. I wish George Lucas had done that with Attack of the Clones.
Oh, it's a low jab.
He could learn something. Whenever a murderous band of crazies come to town, they kidnap a bunch of locals, including the granddaughter of this friend, and Bruce Campbell gets together with Stryker gets together with some of his war buddies, and they go out into the woods and hunt them down, and there's a big shoot 'em up in the woods, and they save the day, essentially. I don't want to ruin it, but it's not. So
it's the A-Team.
But I think this was before the A-Team, actually.
Yes, no, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, they the A-Team ripped it off then. Yeah, as did First Blood was 79, wasn't it?
The film came out in 82, but it was based on a book.
Ah, right, okay. Then this is something similar to that. If you like that kind of film, then this is absolutely should be on your watch list. It has everything that they became known for. There is a little injection of comedy here and there, which is quite nicely put in. It doesn't feel out of place in any way. It has decent amounts of gore. Bruce's role is a wee bit dull for Bruce, but he carries it off quite well and looks the part. Sam Raimi is the one that steals the show, playing the ridiculously over-the-top leader of the crazy gang, and I think he played it so well. That's maybe one of the reasons why he played the same role in the remake of this, which was called Thou Shalt Not Kill Except, that came out in 87, 88 maybe. And all in, for a 40-minute package, this has an awful lot to go for. Again, they rip music from other films and throw it in there. There's Patton and North by Northwest and a couple of other well-known scores that you're sitting going, what was that from again? But that's as far as I got with Patton and North by Northwest. But there are others, and it's just remarkably simple. It doesn't bog down. It doesn't have a lull or anything. It is just constantly entertaining. The one thing I would say is a bit disappointing is that the climactic battle between Bruce and Sam doesn't really work quite as well, because I think they must have missed out a bit where Bruce does a bit of ass kicking because he gets his ass kicked and ends up getting saved by his buddies again. But yeah, did you get a chance to have a look at this one?
No, this was another one that unfortunately life got in the way.
No problem.
I didn't get around to.
Yeah, it's a really good fun film, this. I do recommend it, and you can see them really coming together and making something. And this was also an investment piece for them to take forward and try and get funding. And I think 4 or 5 years later, Josh Becker, who directed this, managed to get the funding for Thou Shalt Not Kill Except. However, Bruce Campbell did not star in that version, which is a bit of a shame. So the next...
That might have been a studio stipulation, though.
I think it can't happen to him that much, because it happened to him with Darkman and Crime Wave. He got bumped from leading in both those films for Liam Neeson and the fella who starred in Crime Wave because they wanted a bigger star.
I've obviously pre-Taken and that sort of thing. I thought Liam Neeson was a bit oddly placed in Darkman, so I almost think Bruce would have been more suited to that role.
Yeah, it would have been perfect for him. And I even for the sequels, Bruce appears in the last shot of Darkman where he puts on the mask and disappears into the crowd. And then they made 2 more movies, and I thought, well, hey, they'll get Bruce in for those 2 more movies. But they didn't. They went and recast it, because it would have been a nice idea had he walked off into the crowd with the Bruce Campbell mask on and be Bruce in the next one. But that didn't happen. Instead, in 1981, the guys moved on to Toro, Toro, Toro. Not the war epic. This is a Toro with 2 R's in it. This is directed by Scott Spiegel and Josh Becker, and it is remarkably simple. It's about a lawnmower that goes a bit nuts, one of those self-driving lawnmowers, and it takes off, and the shenanigans that it causes around town. I like this film. It's really simple. A bit like The Blind Waiter. It's just sheer comedy throughout. It even manages to result in a custard pie fight, because it's a lawnmower, obviously.
Obviously.
Yes. Did you get a watch of this one?
No. Again, one I wanted to. It's interesting, though, reading about them and listening to you discuss them, how towards the end they got into sort of back and forth. They'd sort of delve into one, like a horror, and then go back to comedy, and then they'd try a war film back to comedy, and noticing the back and forth is quite interesting. We'll see. Sort of dipping their toe in different ponds, if you will.
Mm-hmm, yeah, well, it's a good one to watch. I think they generally sell around their shorts were about 6 minutes long each, and they're really easy to watch and stomach, because they're so light and fluffy. It is like watching a Donald Duck cartoon or a Looney Tunes or Merry Melodies or something like that. And I love that they carved out that little niche during the period of honing their skills making these. Whereas you see someone like Kevin Smith, who was making films, he I don't believe he ever made the extent of movies that these guys made over the years, and he got kind of lucky with one of his early feature lengths, whereas these guys actually sat down and plotted out all these things. Back in the days of making a Super 8 film, it was not easy to do. No. Going and cutting and pasting and things like that, or cutting and pasting, I can't even use that terminology.
It's a very 21st century term, that.
Well, yes, whereas now you have people who go onto YouTube and they upload their films, and there isn't the creativity that you have here, where they use practical effects to the nth degree. You have custard pie fights, you have costumes, you have sets that they've gone and constructed for a 6-minute film. That's going to be seen in their minds at the time by very few people. And I know that they were sort of packaging this together and showing it to investors and possibly playing them before the likes of It's Murder, whenever they were touring around, playing it at various venues. But it was just it was a perfect learning exercise, and it goes to show that they were learning and producing quality efforts like this. Yeah. So the next one I know you have seen, and that's Cleveland Smith Bounty Hunter, which was made in 1982 after the release of Evil Dead. What did you think of Cleveland Smith Bounty Hunter?
I loved it. Again, it was brilliant. At first I thought, am I watching his audition tape for Indiana Jones here? And quickly look up, 1982 is a parody, and it is a brilliant parody. He's got the outfit right. What I love is they obviously didn't have access to great special effects, so they played on it and just went silly with it, and it just works so well. And the parody of the different films, I love the bit with the boulder, and obviously you think, it's just the bit from Raiders. Oh, he's gonna, no, got it. And then just the shot of a little action figure stuck to a ball rolling around and around and around. I was kicking myself watching that, and it's all in black and white, and the way they combined their dodgy but fun special effects and the actual live action stuff, it was really well done. I had a blast watching this one.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What was Raimi as a Nazi?
Yes.
Hilarious. And parts of it, I think, to do with more the tribesmen chasing him, reminded me. It looked like it would have been inspiration for the fights in Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls, when he's in Africa and he goes to meet the other tribe and he gets in a fight with one of them and loses. It reminded me of that, so I do wonder if that would possibly acted as inspiration for that.
It could well be, yeah.
It.
It's possible. Bruce and Jim Carrey do actually cross paths a couple of times, as we will go into. I think when it comes to this film, this is one that eluded me for a long time. I remember having a picture of it and thought, oh my word, Bruce Campbell's playing Indiana Jones. And they did that, so I had to track this down. It wasn't until YouTube came along that this actually presented itself. There's two different versions of this. There's one that has a large amount of stock footage that's inserted, maybe 10 or 20 minutes worth, to really help create the vibe of what's happening here. And then there's the version that we watched through prior to recording this, that's more direct and to the point. Obviously, it's probably one that's been. They couldn't use the stock footage for it to be re-released in some shape or form. It has Cheryl Gutteridge again, and Sam Raimi, and a bunch of the familiar names throughout. But it is the extent that they went to with creating stop motion for one of the particular scenes. I think that comes through in Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2, as you will find, because they do use quite a bit of vastly superior stop motion as well in those two films. We have just another collection of constant gags for gag's sake, right from the first couple of seconds where he lights a match and to reveal the title of the film, and then burns his fingers on the match. And there's a big gag at the end where the quest for the MacGuffin that they're looking for is a gag itself, and it's worth sitting for because it's kind of clever. And I love to think that this was another investor film that they were looking for, and they wanted to make a big budget lampoon of the Indiana Jones series because Raiders was such a big hit the year previous to them making this. But I can't imagine how a studio would ever go, yes, we want to do this, here's $1 million to go and make something as somewhat incoherent as this, because it is a wee bit incoherent as well. But I think the planets aligned for this film. The film stock that they were shooting on, the black and white film stock, was damaged, and that actually added to the authenticity of this being
Absolutely.
A 1930s, 40s serial adventure that you would have seen in the cinema prior to one of the big films being released, which is what Raiders of the Lost Ark was going for as well. But so yeah, that's pretty much all the actual shorts that we really need to be looking at. There are a vast amount more. I think there's about 65 or 70 in total, and they're little oddities that don't quite fit with Bruce's filmography, but they're worth mentioning because you can see so much of his career being created from this. He has a very relaxed and easy presence on screen. He's quite, moving from something like Strikers to War to Cleveland Smith shows that he has a great amount of range at such an early time in his career. Bruce he's been critical of his performance in the original Evil Dead because he finds it very difficult. He cringes watching that the whole way through. But if you watch something like The Strikers War or Cleveland Smith, he does give a big, larger-than-life performance, and maybe it's because he knew, or the pressure wasn't on him to perform the goods as it was in the Evil Dead, and you are always a bit worried about whenever you're doing something with so much relying on you to keep it from falling flat.
He certainly wouldn't be the first actor either to not like watching their own performances. So, and it doesn't matter if you're an actor or a writer or even a teacher. everyone is critical of their own performance in whatever they do. Everyone is overly, or most people are overly critical. I'm sure most people often think of something in there they've done in the past and kick themselves over it. Oh, why did I do that? Silly.
Yeah, and I fully agree. He has little moments that come through. You can see them in the comedies that he made, that pop up in the likes of Hercules and Xena, which is a predominantly comical role that he plays there, a sort of comic relief to the more serious principle in those TV shows. And this kind of practice shows that, or not practice, this kind of the performance shows that he is totally natural at slipping from the sword-toting hero to a ridiculous buffoon very easily, whilst also being able to capture a little bit of drama where necessary in the likes of Striker's War. He plays a drunk who's trying to deal with some demons at the back of his head, and he does it rather well without any full professional training. He's a natural on screen, and that's the kind of thing that really attracts his fan base to him.
Yes, I will say another one that I did see was simply called Radio Snake Commercial.
Oh, yes.
I have no idea what he was trying to advertise, apart from the fact that if I ever want to make an advert, I know who to call, because that was funny. That was 30 seconds of utter ridiculousness, but it worked really well. And the other one I wanted to mention was called Attack of the Helping Hand, which was like when a product, a classic, I don't think it's much a thing in this country, but in America they have little mascots for their products, like, oh, make your own burgers, and here's their helping hand thing. And this woman goes to make burgers, and the helping hand gets, shall we say, a bit handsy. and Sam Raimi stars in it as the milkman, which is rather odd, but it was funny and ridiculous. But the production value of a glove trying to kill her in the end and trying to kill the milkman, the way they did, like when she's trying to drown it, and you can just make out that there's someone else's arm in there. She's got her hands around their wrist and straightenning like the threat. But the way they've shot it to try and hide that as best they can, it was very good. And obviously, involves Sam Raimi, and Bruce was in the background. He was filming this. He wasn't actually in it. Mm-hmm. Well, knowingly anyway, he might have been the hand. Noticing an obsession with hands,
yes,
between those two, because I may not have seen The Evil Dead, but I am aware of certain aspects of it. So, yes. Yeah,
this is a perfect example. That particular film is a perfect example of a demonstration reel for the sequence in Evil Dead 2, which we will come to, and that's one of the most exciting parts of doing this kind of podcast, is being able to talk about that sort of thing. All right, well, that about brings us to the end of our intro episode. Next week, we plan to look at The Evil Dead, and we are going to look at 1981. This was the big film that really put them on the map, and it was certainly helped by the likes of, say, Stephen King, who described it as the most ferociously original film of the year. And I think this is the film that sort of concreted them in history, showed them what they could do, and it was upward from them. It wasn't an easy upward. They had to fight against the Hollywood machine in order to get everything that they managed to do over the years, but 1981 was one of the most interesting years in Bruce's career, and we'll be back next week to talk over 1981 in the first episode of A Year in the Career. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you want to get in touch, you can by emailing me at Gareth@ayearinthecareer.com or Simon at A Year in the Rear.
A Year in the Rear?
Dear me. Or Simon at ayearinthecareer.com. You can find me on GarethMiles.com or at GarethMiles on Twitter. And Simon?
You can find me at moviemustache.com and at movie_mustache on Twitter.
Terrific. And other than that, take care.
Thanks for listening.
Loosey Goosey Scary Berry.